Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of Coco and Daltz. I'm not Daltz.
And I'm not Coco.
And I say exciting because we're coming to you almost in real time after we went to a B-52s concert yesterday.
Yes, we did.
Yes, we did. Yesterday was my birthday, and
Happy belated birthday, Coco. Why didn't I should have got you a card or something.
Oh, yeah, you should have. But you got me B-52s concert tickets.
Oh, right.
So I'll take that in lieu of a card.
Okay.
Yeah, I found out like a month ago that the B-52s were playing near us on my birthday, and I immediately texted Daltz and said, OMG, this is a sign. We have to go to this show on my birthday, because the B-52s were my favorite band in the 8th grade when they released Cosmic Thing. I was a huge B-52s fan, so I said, let's do this. So we did this. It was a triple bill. The B-52s were the main act. Berlin and OMD, other 80s nostalgia acts, were the openers. So, Daltz, what'd you think?
For people who don't know anything about who these bands are, I will name their biggest hits.
Okay, do it.
As far as I can recall.
Yeah.
So B-52s, obviously, Rock Lobster or Love Shack, perhaps.
Yeah, Rome.
Those are their big hits. For me, it was Rock Lobster because that was such a wild, crazy song back in the 70s and early 80s. Nobody was doing anything like that. So that's who the B-52s are, and not just a tasty alcoholic beverage that you can have at a bar sometime. And they had those on special last night, by the way.
They did?
Yes.
Oh.
When I went to get you a water and me a non-water, the lady said, we have other specials as well.
I had no idea the B-52 was even a drink, so I would have totally had that if...
All right. So off the air, I will tell you a B-52 story.
No, okay.
And then OMD, otherwise known as Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark.
Is that really what it stands for?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
They also, so this is a 40-year anniversary tour. So all these bands started 40 years ago, apparently, in some way, shape, or form. OMD, their biggest hits are probably known from the John Hughes movies, but they were an alternative band from the 80s. If You Leave was probably the biggest one from that.
If you've ever listened to like the 80s lunch hour on any radio station, you've heard that song.
Heavy on the synth.
Yeah.
And then Berlin, of course, their most famous song is from the Tom Cruise movie Top Gun, Take My Breath Away, it rocketed to number 1, written by Giorgio Moroder, not by the band. But they also had a lot of hits in the 80s, most notably the song Sex.
which I had never heard until last night when they played it.
Which is not subtle. It's about sex, the song. And also No More Words. So actually a very good alternative band from the 80s. I knew of them before their big hit in the movie, and I liked their stuff. They were pretty good. So those are the bands that were at this storied venue. This venue that we went to has a lot of history. It is. It's one of those venues that back in the times was a movie theater. No, actually, we went to see it at the casino.
I was gonna say, what? Where are we going with this story? I don't really know where we're going with this.
And I'm such a good guy to Coco that I'm a good podcast partner that I spared no expense, and we had the seats that were third from the very last row.
They were still good seats, though. There's not a bad seat in that theater. I was happy.
Well, I noticed the lighting
the lights
got in the way.
Did get in the way of the screen behind the stage a little bit, but I wasn't really too upset about that.
But the sound was really good.
Yeah, the sound was great.
Which, if you're there for a concert, it probably should be about the sound, and the sound was really good.
So Berlin was the first act.
Opening act,
They only played 7 songs. I knew 3 of them. I knew No More Words and Take My Breath Away, and then I also knew the very last song they played, which was a cover of Highway to Hell. So,
which was unforeseen.
Yeah, totally.
And
unforeseen.
It was great.
Yeah, it was great.
Terry Nunn, who's the lead singer, she still has her pipes.
Yeah, she sounded fantastic, and she was energetic. She was really engaged with the audience.
Yeah.
She seemed super stoked to be there.
I was really impressed with that. So it was a 35-minute set, like you said, not very long.
Quick in and out.
And speaking
of sex.
She was, 35 minutes, I don't know. She was very engaging with the crowd. And when it came time to play Take My Breath Away, which you knew it was coming, it was done very well, I thought. So she sang it a cappella, the first set of lyrics, and then went out into the crowd and sang it, and the band jammed in and everything. That was really well done. Like, I was thinking, okay, how cheesy is this going to be? You're playing a song from Top Gun, the soundtrack that you didn't write, and you're playing it up, and you're at the casino. How awful is this going to be? But actually, it was really good. She did it in I'm not going to say classy, but it was a very appropriate way for that song, I thought. What'd you think of Berlin? You liked them? That was the first time you'd seen them live.
Yeah, that's the first time I'd seen them live. Like I said, I was more familiar with their discography than OMD.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was good. It was exactly what you would want for an opening act. Like, not on stage super long. You weren't just like, oh my God, get these people off. I can't wait for the B-52s. But even though their set was short, it was still rocking.
It was powerful.
Yeah, it was very powerful. They did a good job, so I enjoyed it.
And I thought it took some guts to play. So you have such a short set. You get 7 songs, 35 minutes, and they played a cover for their last song. I thought that took some guts because the record companies probably play your newest song or play something that we can sell. Mm-hmm. And they were like, nah, we're just going to play Highway to Hell. And she introduced it. The way she introduced it, I thought was really interesting too. She said, I am now going to play my favorite religious song.
Right, exactly.
and I was like, oh, I didn't know they were born again.
And then the guitar riff came on. And we were all like, what?
And everybody knew. Yeah. And all the people in the crowd, and none of whom really had any hair, really into it. That really resonated with that crowd, because that crowd was not a young and up-and-coming crowd.
We were very close to being the youngest people in that crowd.
It was kind of scary, actually.
And I will confess that on my birthday, I turned 43. Right. So that should tell you.
And I'm older than 43, but I'm not, I don't think, in the same demographic as most of those people.
No, definitely not.
So and then we went on to OMD,
who I enjoyed that set as well. I did think it went on a bit too long.
Oh yeah,
I know you really liked it, part of that was because I got up at 5 a.m. yesterday, and so I was very tired. And I'm not gonna lie, I did nod off a couple times during that set, not because the quality of the set was bad, but just because I was like, that's the set I was like, Jesus Christ, can we just get the B-52s on stage already?
Well, and you were in unfamiliar territory too, because you didn't know any of the songs.
I knew If You Leave. That's the OMD song.
Where every song that came on, I was like, yeah, I haven't heard this in forever. And they were really surprising to me because they were very engaging. So I've only known Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark from radio and maybe a couple of interviews. They were so mainstream alternative when I was a kid that I didn't really pay all that much attention to them, because everybody liked OMD when I was growing up in the alternative genre.
You're so sexy when you speak French.
Mais oui. So I was never really into them. It's sort of like liking The Cure when you're an alternative fan. There's that's the mainstream alternative band, right? Mm-hmm. So I didn't pay much attention to them. I thought they were good, but I didn't have all their albums. And then I now will look into them again, because I was really impressed with them. I was really impressed with the lead singer, and I was really impressed with the keyboard guy. So those are the 2 original guys, and they were really engaging. And so people might know Enola Gay, If You Leave, which we said, Electricity, which was made in 1976, they said.
Which did not remotely sound like it was from 76. It sounded straight out of the 80s, like synth-heavy new wave. Yeah. I was shocked when he said 76.
It was made in the same year you were made.
I know.
And it was also very... so just to put it in context, 1976 was disco and Barry Manilow and fluffy business, and then we had punk later on. So... we were sort of going into punk from 76 on. So this was a very interesting, almost like Kraftwerk. Yeah, they're very heavy on the synth. And what I thought was very impressive, no guitar. So they had the lead guy came out, which I probably should have his name, but I don't. He was really good. And he came out for the first 3 songs and played rhythm guitar. And then he got rid of the rhythm guitar and then did crazy Jim Carrey banana dances.
Right, white dad dancing.
It was amazingly crazy, but it worked somehow. And so he had the whole stage to himself pretty much, because they had 2
platforms.
They had 2 platforms. They had 2 sets of keyboards, and then they had a drummer, and that was it. And that's gutsy, and it was really good. The crowd, I think of everybody, I think the crowd got into that the most.
Yeah, definitely.
I think there were a lot of OMD fans there, and I also think there were a lot of B-52 fans there who were not expecting OMD to be so good. And so that was a really that was top notch. That was what I got the most out of. I really liked Berlin. Their set was short, or else I probably would have liked it even more. But I liked Terry Nunn was very engaging. Lead singer guy for OMD, and Paul Humphreys, who was the other guy in the keyboards. They were great. Their melodies were bang on. Their voices didn't seem to be decrepit. As when you get older, your voice changes and all that sort of stuff. They were, I don't know what they've been drinking. Maybe all that tea in England has been looking after their throats all these years.
I think they drink some stronger stuff in England, just based on my time that I lived there. But that's just me.
What'd you think?
I liked it. They were very energetic. I knew one of their songs, but I liked all the other songs.
Yeah.
It was just crazy to me because the two keyboards had computers on them as well. And I've said this to Daltz a couple of times, like, I mean, that sound is straight out of the 80s, so that's not equipment anymore. So, like, what kind of program do they have to be running on that computer to get the keyboard to sound the way it did 35 years ago when they were actually singing all these songs at the time, like to get that very synth-heavy new wave sound.
And it was very synth-heavy, and it was the keyboards were dominant. And maybe it's also a case of when they were playing it back in the day, it was kind of ahead of its time. Yeah. So maybe the technology is not necessarily meeting the art, but it's coming close in that way. The lead singer's name is Andy McCluskey, which I should have known.
Okay.
So Andy McCluskey and Paul Humphreys are the two original members who were on stage. The other guys were, I think, session guys. So they were active from 78, it says, according to Wikipedia, which we know is very accurate and cannot be changed by anyone unless you have a degree in music.
Maybe they wrote that song in 76, but then they didn't actually release their first album until 78.
Yeah, and I think that's the case because I don't remember that song. I remember that song from the early 80s. And they were active from 78 to 96, and then, according to this, 2006 to present. So
I wonder what their music today sounds like. If they released an album in the past, 10 years, is it still keyboard heavy, or are they...
Is it still poppy? Well, they didn't play any songs other than from...
the 80s.
The 78 to 96 period, so I have a feeling there's not a lot out there that's catchy. But man, oh man, if you talk about nostalgia, that... I can understand why. I used to look at people with derision, and they would go to the Lynyrd Skynyrd show, or one of these kinds of shows, a Scorpions show, and be like, "Come on, what are you doing? There's more music out there now. You go to a new show." And then now I understand why, because it was some of those songs I hadn't heard in years, and they were perhaps because of technology. And also the shape of those guys' voices, but they sounded just like they had in previous, on records and stuff like that, on CDs, and they weren't lip syncing. You could tell they were actually playing stuff.
Yeah.
So moving on to the B-52s, who were the headliners of this particular event.
Yes, that's the whole reason we went to this show, was
because you're a huge B-52s fan, and I'm a huge fan of the beverage.
Yeah.
Which I'll tell you about off air.
Oh, geez, okay.
So let's talk about B-52s, Coco.
Yes.
Give me your impressions. And I don't mean your impression of Fred, like that. I don't mean that kind of...
Knock it a little louder, sugar. There we go. So I'll start with something nice. The set list I actually enjoyed. There were only 2 songs they played that I did not know. One was from the album they released sometime about 10, 15 years ago, around 2008 or so. I had heard of that song. I just hadn't actually heard it. And then there was another song. It was the very second song they did. Private Idaho they opened with, which I was stoked about. And then
So which came first, the movie or the song?
The song.
The song did?
Yeah.
Okay.
The song was, about 10 years before the movie, I think? 5 or 10 years.
Gus Van Sant movie, I believe.
Yeah, with River Phoenix and...
Keanu Reeves?
I believe it was Keanu. Yeah, wow. We're going way back today.
Look at that. People are nodding off right now.
So the second song after Private Idaho, I don't know the name of it. It sounded like it was about the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Yeah.
But then everything else they did their hits. They did Rock Lobster. Yeah. They did Planet Claire. They did Love Shack and Rome and Channel Z and Deadbeat Club and Give Me Back My Man and Private Idaho. And they didn't do anything off of the Good Stuff album, which came out in 92, I believe, which I was kind of bummed about. But, but yeah, they did, all their big hits from the 80s, Whammy Kiss. It was, I thought, I would have liked it if they would have stayed on longer and done more songs, but I was glad that there was a wide like
wide spectrum of their
a wide
stuff.
spectrum of their stuff.
So just for people's education and edification, the original lineup had Fred Schneider, Kate Pearson, Cindy Wilson, Ricky Wilson, and Keith Strickland. And Ricky Wilson died of AIDS in 1985, and Keith Strickland's no longer touring with the band. I think he's still considered a member of the band. He just doesn't want to tour.
Doesn't want to tour. So it was Fred, Kate, and Cindy.
Yeah. And then a backup band.
A backup band. The drummer was amazing.
The drummer was great.
The drummer was fantastic. He was super high energy the whole time.
Yeah, and the guitarist was great too. Like that's tough to fill in for. So you're playing the riff from Rock Lobster. That's some big shoes to fill, right? And he was seamless, and he seemed like he was having a good time. So.
And I would like to say also, I don't know why I was not expecting a gigantic Rock Lobster to come out onto the stage and dance around during a Rock Lobster, but I should have expected that.
Because Casino.
Casino, that's right. Yeah, so
it's all about the cheesy, classy art.
I got a picture of the Rock Lobster on stage, so maybe we can figure out how to attach that to our podcast art. And
yes, we should do that.
So that's the nice stuff I have to say. What about you? What nice stuff do you have to say?
Okay,
or do you just have any nice stuff at all, and you just want to get right into the?
The nice stuff, I thought that Kate was fantastic.
She had a lot of energy, and she's the
oldest.
Her
voice was bang on.
Yeah.
She hit the notes. Like, if you haven't seen B-52s, haven't heard their songs, there's a lot of almost operatic range with the two women singers in it. So that's Kate and Cindy. And just amazing vocal range, like just unbelievable talents. And Kate was bang on. She hit her own notes, like I said.
She had a lot of energy. She was trying to engage with the audience, talk to them.
She was walking around the stage.
Yeah,
She wasn't just standing in her spot.
Yeah, she was dancing around a little bit.
Yeah, and she was great. And there was a couple of instances where Fred disappeared. We're not sure where he went to, off the stage for a couple of songs at least. And Kate was the dominant of the two. I thought Kate and Cindy. So yeah, those are my positive thoughts. The drummer was fantastic. We already mentioned him, but the drummer and the rhythm section, the drummer and the bass guitars were really good, I thought, and the guitarist. And the keyboard guy, he seemed fine, but I didn't really get to know him very well. So, he had a nice hat on. He had a pork pie hat on. So,
so speaking of Kate having some energy, yeah. So Fred and Cindy kind of didn't.
They seemed like they were of their age.
I want to preface this by saying that I have never seen the B-52s live before, so I don't have any other performances of theirs to judge this against. And I also want to mention that Fred and Cindy are both in their 60s, so they've been doing this a long time. If I were up on a stage 25 years from now, I might not be dancing around either.
So they've been doing this for 40 years. You can imagine being the B-52s for 40 years.
Right, exactly. Yeah, Cindy just kind of seemed out of it. Like she was just kind of standing in her spot, playing her bongos and singing. Her voice has not held up as well as Kate's voice or Terry Nunn's voice. Like there was a lot of pitchiness, as Randy Jackson would have said on American Idol.
Did you catch that one spot? I know we were talking off the air about this, but I don't know if we talked about this, is that there was one spot where Cindy sang Channel Z, and it was not the song they were singing. She sang the chorus to Channel Z, and it was a different song.
Oh, I didn't.
And it was
hear that.
Right at the end of the song. At the end of the song.
I did not hear that.
And because the camera was on her, and she looked, and then she smiled, and then the song ended. And so
there were some set list issues. Because apparently that happened, and then the fourth song in, Fred was all like, "Now we're gonna play a power ballad," and then apparently the band was like, "What are you talking about? Now we're gonna play Channel Z."
Yeah,
and Fred got his face right down on the stage next to the sheet with the set list, and he was like, "Oh no, we're not." And then they went into Channel Z or whatever it was.
I think that, why I was thinking about that afterwards. I think the reason is the Power Ballad was the last song before he bailed to go backstage. So I think he was like, okay, one more song and I get to go and lie down on a couch in the green room.
And he did seriously, they only did 3 or 4 songs, and then he just
he
walked off stage for 3 or 4 songs, and I was like, are you having some health issues that haven't been publicized?
Yeah.
Because you weren't doing, like, the OMD guy was like doing freaking jumping jacks on stage, and Fred was
He was
like,
dancing like the guy from James. You ever seen the guy from James dance? Like his arms are all over the place and twisting like pipe cleaners and stuff like that.
right, like he was kind of swaying a little bit, but he wasn't doing anything high impact. But again, he's like 68 years old.
Right.
So the fact that he was on stage at like 11 o'clock at night,
Well, maybe he had to go have his nap, or
he might have, or maybe
some
he had
Neocitrin or something like that.
maybe he had to take a leak. I don't know. Maybe,
Right, or warm milk.
Right, exactly. So that was what the OMD set was in terms of energy. That's what I thought the B-52s were going to be. I just thought there was going to be more engaging with the audience, like more dance.
Without having seen them before,
right,
but just experience their videos and listening to their music, you would think that they would be higher energy. I agree.
Yeah, totally. So, but then again, they're in their 60s and 70s, so I don't know. But I'm glad that maybe they're not going to tour again, because maybe they're just like, I can't do this anymore, and this is going to be their farewell tour.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that we saw them. Like I was disappointed, and I hate to say that, because like I don't want, like, I'm glad that we went. I'm glad I got the experience. Like 13-year-old me, like, was such a huge fan, and I was like completely stoked. And I don't want you especially to be like, well, I got her this birthday gift that she freaking hates.
Well,
like next year I'm gonna get her a half-eaten cupcake, and be like, here you go. I can't make you happy.
Like I did last year.
Right. So I don't want people to think that I am unappreciative, but it's just like maybe the idea of what it was going to be in my head was just.
Well, this is the podcast. It has nothing to do with appreciation, Coco. This is an evaluation of the art.
That's true.
So it's completely neutral. I had read some reviews about the show, because this is obviously a touring entity with 3 bands. It's a triple header, and they've been going around the country. And I read quite a few things about it, and the reviews that I read were reflected in the performances. So Berlin and OMD, everybody's like, this is great, I love them. And then they were like, B-52s, well, Fred disappeared, and we don't know what happened, and they weren't very sharp. And so I had gone into the show with that in my head, and didn't want to say anything to you, because I obviously didn't want to prejudice the jury, one thing, and I also didn't want to be like, oh yeah, we're going in for your birthday. I'm going to take you to this crap show. So I didn't say anything to you, but I wanted it, and I also wanted to play it out too, because whenever somebody reviews something, same with the case with us. I mean, it depends on your taste, and it depends on what mood you're in, and it also, if you haven't eaten and you're hangry, for example,
which never happens to me, and also maybe you just get somebody on a bad night,
right?
Right.
They're entitled to be, have good nights and bad nights,
right? Exactly. Like it
can't
happens.
be on all the time. I mean, especially for 40 years,
right? And especially because this is not the first stop on their tour, where they're just like, yeah, let's do this. Like they've been on tour for a while, so they're probably
like coming out of Pennsylvania and going into New Hampshire, like it's like, good night, Connecticut. Like where are we again?
I loved how the Berlin lady was just like, so I really don't have any stories about coming to Connecticut, so we're gonna make memories tonight. Like I thought that was a really good way of doing that.
She was like, where are you from? Are you from Hartford? And everybody's like, no. Are you from Boston? I don't know what the other one she said. And then, how about everywhere else? And like, we're from. Are you from? You're not from here, are you? Like where the casino is.
Right. It was. I will also say that this is just not completely related to the performance whatsoever. But I felt bad for Cindy, because she was wearing this like shiny dinosaur onesie. And the costume designer did her dirty, because there was a lot of bunching and gathering in the downstairs trouser area. So it was not very flattering. So I felt very bad for Cindy, as opposed to Kate, who just had on like a fringe mini dress, and she was
she had the
shaking
green
the fringe
and the red hair. It was quite striking. Whereas Cindy was the blonde with the almost like the Aqua woman. Yeah. Scaly thing. I don't know what that was supposed to be.
It looked like a dinosaur, I'm telling you, with like the spines on the shoulders and stuff.
Right. Yeah, he's big and he's blue and he's your best friend.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Totally.
So maybe they were trying to evoke the thrift shop aesthetic, which, according to the wiki, is what they were going for in when they were founded in the 70s.
I also was surprised that they were not on stage longer. I understand that as the final act of a triple bill, people don't want to be there till 1 o'clock in the morning.
especially that demographic.
Right, especially that demographic, right? This isn't like a bunch of 20-year-old kids, right?
But it was a Saturday night.
But it was a Friday night.
Oh, it was a Friday night.
Yeah, it was a Friday night. Yeah, that screwed me up too, taking the day off from work for once. Like, what?
Sorry, they're all Saturday nights to me.
But yeah, so OMD was on for like a solid.
They were a good hour.
They were a good hour,
Yeah.
and the B-52s.
Not quite an hour.
Not quite an hour.
Yeah.
And that was including the time they went off stage, like the 3 to 5 minutes between when they left after their main set and came back for the encore.
Well, and there was, you and I had some questions about that. It's like, are they done? Because they had not played Planet Claire and they had not played Rock Lobster. Right?
Yeah.
And so we're like, and I had read some reviews saying they hadn't played all the hits. So I was thinking, okay, so we're going to get short shrifted on the time on stage, and also the songs they play on stage are not their biggest hits, which I think the people in the crowd, that's what they were looking for. I mean, a crowd like that was a hit crowd.
Right.
It wasn't looking for B-sides.
Right. Like deep cuts off Mesopotamia or whatever.
Thank you. That was much better than what I said. So you and I were looking at each other like, this can't be it. And the only reason I knew, because the vibe almost, like we were clapping and clapping and clapping, and then the clapping sort of petered out.
Yeah.
The only reason I knew that they were going to come back on is because the house lights didn't come up, right?
Right.
Because they were the last act. And then they eventually stumbled back on stage and were good for the next two songs. Like those two, they rocked for the last two songs.
Yeah, they definitely were high energy for those two songs.
They all went off stage and had some pep pills.
Right. They did some rails.
Yeah, well, they're 60s, so probably, like, who knows what it would have been.
Yeah.
Ben Gay was applied or something like that.
I did read that Madonna said the difference between touring in her 20s and touring in her 50s was like after she got done with the show in her 20s, they would go out to the local dance clubs and they would dance until like 5 o'clock in the morning and then like go back to the hotel and go to sleep. And then in her 50s, like as soon as the show was over, she was in the green room icing her knees and drinking herbal tea. And so maybe that's the B-52s. They went backstage and got a couple espresso shots from Starbucks
and some ice packs and
not like they were in their, not like it was when they were in their 20s and the 70s.
Yeah, who knows what it was like in those days.
Yeah, no kidding.
So nostalgia, now that we've wrapped up our review of the actual event, these kinds of events themselves, the nostalgia tours, good, bad, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I still like them. Like I said, I'm still glad that we saw the B-52s, especially because there may not be a chance to see them again.
Yeah.
But it kind of made me sad.
Yeah.
It really kind of, and I understand that time eventually defeats us all.
Right.
That'll be me one day. But I was kind of sad.
I am of the similar ilk, similar attitude as I went to see the Psychedelic Furs years ago in St. Louis, years after they were big. So this was in the 2000s. And I remember Richard Butler's voice was awful. And I came away thinking, that's just too bad.
Yeah.
That was my impression coming away from that show. And I think there were other people coming away from that show that we saw as well, because I noticed a lot of people leaving.
Yeah, I was
prematurely leaving after 2 or 3 songs.
Yeah, I was really surprised by that. And I kind of looked at you and I was like, what the heck? And you were like, oh, they're probably just moving closer. But then like,
but that was because I didn't want you to like, I was like, I would leave.
Like a few rows down from us, there was a lady who danced through, she was on her feet and dancing all through Berlin and all through OMD, and she didn't even make it to the end of like the main set for the B-52s. Like probably like 2 or 3 songs before the end.
Yeah.
Like she and her row cleared out.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And I was disappointed further as we were standing in this row, and we stood for most of the, I'd say 3/4 of the last set. And there was nobody behind us eventually. And then also I noticed about halfway through the B-52 set that there was nobody standing beside the people standing beside us to the right.
Oh. For
the whole row. So why were we all hemmed in like that? Like I felt like telling the guys, move down.
Right.
Just move down.
Right. Yeah.
So we can all spread out. But they were like, I don't know, they're law following.
Law abiding.
Law abiding is like, we bought these tickets, we're going to stay in these seats. So yeah, nostalgia, you're not a big fan.
I mean,
in general, this show, you're glad you saw it.
Yeah.
But.
Well, I, like 13 years ago, I saw the Stones. And I mean,
talk about nostalgia.
They're freaking ancient.
Right.
And they were, I mean, Mick Jagger was still strutting around the stage. And, I mean, he's going till he dies.
Keith Richards was still half lit.
Yeah. Keith was still like leaning up against like a post, to stay upright with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. So,
barely alive somehow.
Right. So, I understand based on ages, they're not going to be doing jumping jacks and flying around with harnesses and stuff. But
it's all nostalgia, especially with the Stones. Like you and I have had this conversation. When was the last time they had relevant music?
Yeah, true.
And the same thing, you could say objectively, the same thing with those bands we saw last night. They haven't been relevant in a long time.
Right.
We associate them with our youth, so therefore they're valuable to us. But, I don't think my girls are going to be like, oh, Daddy, how was the OMD concert? Like,
right, exactly.
They don't even know who that is. I mean,
right. Have they even heard If You Leave?
No, probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah, and maybe Rock Lobster because it's kind of a goofy song and it's been on kids.
I think Melanie knows Love Shack.
Yeah.
I think she does know Love Shack because everybody knows Love Shack.
Right.
But.
So there's some songs that are good that way, that are across generations, but still that doesn't. And the way that music is consumed is different these days too, right? Like, so my youngest daughter has come home and said, Daddy, I really like that song Africa by Toto. I was like, whoa. And my daughter she's 13 years old, so there's no way that that's anywhere relevant to her contextual upbringing. And it's not like I'm playing lots of Toto around the house.
Did you ever have a Toto tape back in the day?
I didn't have a Toto tape, but I actually was thinking about it because Toto also had a song called 99 that came out around the same time that Wayne Gretzky started to be a thing in his young days. And I remember listening to a radio station in Toronto, and they played it, and they said, and just so you know, we talked to the members of the band of Toto, and they said it has nothing to do with Wayne Gretzky. It's like, that's only a question that a Canadian radio station would ask an American band.
Right.
Is that song about Wayne Gretzky?
And they're like, who's Wayne Gretzky?
And they're like, what? What are you talking about?
So, nostalgia, like, we're going to keep consuming it, but...
Well, and it's also relevant. It's contextually relevant to... Like, my nostalgia is not the same as your nostalgia.
Right.
It's not the same as the girls' nostalgia when they're growing up. Like, the Rolling Stones, I would never go see them, but they're nostalgic to you because it represents a certain... Because you were listening, not because you're older than me, because you're not, but you were listening to that stuff growing up, whereas I tried to ignore that stuff growing up because just the way I was built, right? So it's all... And we didn't exactly, not to go into it in detail because it was a birthday present, but it wasn't exactly cheap. So nostalgia is...
But now we can write it off because we're podcasting about it.
Because we talked about it just now.
Yeah,
but,
fist bump.
Yeah, of course. But there's a lot of that going around. So you got tours by Howard Jones coming out. And you got Adam Ant is playing tonight at the casino. So.
And U2 is charging like $500 for cheap seats when
Right,
they go on tour.
right. And U2
Bono doesn't have a voice anymore. Like Bono
Right.
like blew
and
his voice
they are
out.
nothing but a nostalgia act at this point. I was the biggest U2 fan when they were relevant, but they're not anymore. And the next album that comes out will be sort of like an asterisk in their collection, in their oeuvre.
You know what's going to make us feel a little bit better?
What's that?
Cake.
Yes.
So on that
note, we're going to wrap this podcast up so we can go have some birthday cake.
This special birthday edition of the podcast that ended on a sad note, but that's okay because we have cake.
No, cake is a good high note.
Cake is a high note.
I might actually put another candle in it for you.
Oh, yay.
And light it up.
Awesome.
Day after your birthday.
It's all good. Every day is a celebration with you, baby.
If only you could see her face when she says that.
So for another edition of the podcast, I'm not Dolls.
And I'm not Coco.